Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. The recycled air of Kepler-7 carried the metallic tang of industrial progress, but Marcus Reed barely noticed anymore. 3 years on this frontier mining station had dulled his sense of smell, just as it had dulled his sense of wonder. He walked through the maintenance tunnels, datapad in hand, reviewing system diagnostics that all looked disturbingly similar to yesterday's readings and would probably look identical to tomorrow's. The soft chime of his proximity sensor made him pause. Someone was working in Sector Delta, though no maintenance was scheduled. Marcus quickened his pace, following the gentle hum of active machinery through the narrow corridors. As the lead systems engineer, unscheduled work meant potential problems, and problems on a station orbiting a barely stable star meant very bad days. He turned the corner and stopped. A figure knelt beside an open access panel, tools spread with mathematical precision around her. But it wasn't just the unexpected presence that caught his attention. It was the way light seemed to dance across her skin. Crystalline patches along her arms and the back of her neck caught the overhead illumination and refracted it into countless tiny rainbows. Marcus had seen Xenthians before, of course. The galaxy's refugee crisis meant that dozens of species had found their way to frontier stations like Kepler-7, but he'd never paid much attention to the subtle beauty of their bioluminescent skin or how their movements held a grace that spoke of lighter worlds and different gravity. The woman looked up and Marcus felt his breath catch. Her eyes held depths like ocean trenches, dark and vast with flecks of silver that reminded him of stars. The crystalline patterns on her face pulsed with what he'd learned was stress, rapid, irregular flashes that spoke of exhaustion and worry. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice carrying the melodic accent of her people. "I know I'm not supposed to be here during off-shift, but the quantum resonance chamber was showing microfractures. If they spread to the primary coupling, the whole section could cascade failure," Marcus finished, moving closer to peer at her work. What he saw made him whistle softly. The repair job was elegant, almost artistic in its precision. She hadn't just fixed the problem. She'd improved the entire coupling matrix with modifications he wouldn't have thought possible. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Galactic Nova Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. "This is remarkable," Marcus said, crouching beside her to examine the work more closely. "The harmonic stabilization alone should increase efficiency by 12%. How? Did you—" "Xenthian bioresonance," she said quietly, pulling her tools back into their case with practiced efficiency. "We feel the quantum fluctuations. It makes it easier to know where things want to be fixed, rather than where we think they need to be fixed." Marcus blinked. In 3 years of engineering reports and technical briefings, no one had mentioned that Xenthians could literally sense quantum mechanics. Why isn't this in any of our technical manuals?" A bitter smile crossed her features, and the crystalline patterns on her skin shifted to deeper, sadder colors. "Because most species assume we're just good with our hands. They don't ask about the science behind what we do. I'm Lyra, by the way, Lyra Sol, Marcus Reed," he replied, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. When she took it, he noticed how warm her skin was despite its crystalline appearance, and how the light patterns under her surface shifted towards something brighter, more hopeful. "And I'm definitely going to ask about the science." For the first time since he'd found her, Lyra's stress patterns slowed and steadied. "Most humans don't bother with our names, let alone our methods." "Then most humans are missing out," Marcus said, meaning it completely. As he helped her pack up her tools, he found himself studying the way her bioluminescence responded to her emotions, how it made her seem like a living constellation against the stark metal corridors of the station. He didn't know it yet, but in that moment, watching the light play across her face as she smiled genuinely for what might have been the first time in months, Marcus Reed began to fall in love. And more importantly for the future of two species, he began to understand that human curiosity and alien wisdom made for a combination that could change the galaxy. The next day brought Marcus to the commissary earlier than usual, nursing a cup of synthetic coffee while reviewing Lyra's modifications to Sector Delta. The efficiency readings were extraordinary, better than anything the station's human engineers had achieved in months. He'd spent half the night researching Xenthian biomechanics, discovering a species far more sophisticated than their refugee status suggested. "Mind if I sit?" Marcus looked up to find Lyra standing with a tray of what appeared to be algae paste and hydroponic greens. Her crystalline patterns were dim, subdued, the biological equivalent of trying to make herself invisible. "Please," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I wanted to thank you again for yesterday's work. The sector's running better than ever." Lyra settled into her seat, her movements careful and economical. "It's what I'm paid to do." "Except, you're not really being paid to innovate, are you?" Marcus asked gently. "According to your work assignment, you're listed as general maintenance, but that repair was advanced quantum engineering." A pause. Lyra's hand moved unconsciously to her shoulder, where a particularly bright cluster of crystals caught the light. "Advanced degrees from a dead world don't transfer well," she said finally. "I was a systems architect on Xenthia Prime. Built atmospheric processors, quantum relay networks, stellar cartography centers." Her voice dropped. "Then the Galactic Mining Consortium decided our planet had more value as mineral extraction sites than as a living world." Marcus set down his coffee, processing the weight of what she'd just shared. "Your entire civilization? 15 billion people, scattered across 1,000 refugee stations and frontier worlds." The patterns on her skin pulsed once, sharp and bright, before dimming again. "I was one of the lucky ones. I made it out." For a moment the commissary bustled around them, other station personnel grabbing quick meals, the constant hum of recycled air and artificial gravity generators. Marcus watched Lyra pick at her algae paste and made a decision that surprised him. "Have you ever had actual food?" he asked. "I mean, Earth food, real food." Lyra tilted her head, confusion evident in the swirling patterns across her features. "The replicators produce adequate nutrition. That's not what I asked." Marcus stood, leaving his tray. "Come on, I've got something to show you." 20 minutes later, they stood in Marcus's quarters, modest but personalized with Earth memorabilia, and more importantly, a small hydroponics bay where he grew actual vegetables from Earth seed stock. He pulled out tomatoes, basil, real garlic. "This is against station regulations," Lyra said, but her eyes were fixed on the vibrant red of the tomatoes, the rich green of fresh basil leaves. "Sometimes the best things are," Marcus replied, starting to prepare what his grandmother had called a proper pasta sauce. "You know, on Earth, cooking for someone is considered a form of friendship, sometimes something more." As the small kitchen filled with the aroma of garlic and herbs, Lyra's crystalline patterns began to brighten and shift. "The scent," she whispered. "It's complex, layered. Our food printers can't replicate this kind of molecular variance." "How your people had their own cuisine, didn't they?" Marcus asked, stirring the sauce. "Yes." The word came out soft, laden with memory. "We grew crystalline fruits that sang in harmony when ripe, prepared grain that changed flavor based on the harvester's emotional state. Food was art, communication, science all at once." Marcus turned to face her fully. "Tell me about it, all of it. What your world was like, what you miss, what you hope for." And so, as the pasta boiled and the sauce simmered, Lyra began to speak. She told him about cities that grew like living things, their walls responding to the inhabitants' needs, about libraries that stored information in quantum matrices that sang with accumulated knowledge, about her work designing systems that didn't just function, but harmonized with the natural rhythms of their world. When Marcus finally served the meal, Lyra's first bite was accompanied by a cascade of colors across her skin. Surprise, delight, something deeper. "This tastes like care," she said, the universal translator struggling with the concept. "Maybe because it is," Marcus replied. They ate in comfortable silence, broken by questions, Marcus asking about Xenthian culture, technology, philosophy, and Lyra cautiously inquiring about Earth traditions, human emotions, the concepts of friendship, and family in human society. As the station's artificial night cycle dimmed the lighting in his quarters, Marcus realized something had shifted between them. Lyra's stress patterns had faded to almost nothing, replaced by the gentle, steady pulse of contentment. More importantly, she was looking at him not as a station superior or another alien species, but as someone who cared enough to listen. "Thank you," she said as she prepared to leave, "for the food, the conversation, for asking about my home." She paused at the door, "for treating me like a person instead of a refugee." After she left, Marcus stood in his quiet quarters, surrounded by the lingering sense of basil and tomato sauce, and realized that he was beginning to care about Lyra Sol in ways that went far beyond professional respect. The trouble started on a Tuesday, which Marcus would later reflect was typical of the galaxy's tendency to ruin perfectly ordinary moments. He was in the primary engineering bay, reviewing power distribution reports with his team, when Commander Vale's voice crackled through the ship-wide communication system. "All section chiefs to the main conference room. Immediate priority." Marcus exchanged glances with his deputy Torres, who shrugged with the practiced indifference of someone who'd seen 3 commanders come and go. But something in Vale's tone suggested this wasn't routine maintenance scheduling. The conference room was already crowded when Marcus arrived. Section chiefs from every department stood around the central holographic display, which showed a 3-dimensional schematic of the station in alarming shades of red and amber. "As of 0600 hours this morning," Commander Vale began without preamble, "we've experienced cascading systems failures across 14 sectors, life support fluctuations, gravitational anomalies, and quantum processing irregularities that have cost us 47 hours of mining operations." Chief Security Officer Brennan, a human whose bulk seemed designed specifically for intimidation, stepped forward. "Initial investigation suggests sabotage. Someone with intimate knowledge of our systems has been deliberately introducing instabilities." Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Around the table, he saw several department heads avoiding eye contact, while others wore expressions of grim satisfaction he didn't like. "Furthermore," Brennan continued, "these failures coincide directly with increased refugee staff assignments. To those sectors, it seems someone is using their access to undermine station operations." "That's a serious accusation," Dr. Patel from Medical said carefully. "Do you have evidence linking specific individuals to these malfunctions?" Commander Vale activated the display, zooming in on Sector Delta. Marcus's heart sank as he saw Lyra's work assignment highlighted in red, her modifications to the quantum coupling now displayed as unauthorized alterations. "The maintenance worker Lyra Sol has been making unauthorized changes to critical systems," Vale announced. "Changes that we now believe were designed to create dependence on her specific skills, while gradually undermining overall function." "That's not true," Marcus said, standing before he'd consciously decided to speak. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "I reviewed her work personally. It improved efficiency by 12% and eliminated potential cascade failures. That could have killed hundreds of people." Brennan's expression hardened. "With respect, Engineer Reed, your emotional involvement with this particular refugee may be compromising your judgment." The words hit like a physical blow. Around the table, Marcus saw faces ranging from sympathy to disgust to knowing smirks. His feelings for Lyra weren't as secret as he'd thought. "My judgment," Marcus said carefully, "is based on engineering data, not emotion. Lyra Sol's modifications prevented 3 potential system failures in the past week alone. If that's sabotage, then she's the most incompetent saboteur in galactic history." "Or the most clever," Vale interjected. "Create problems that only she can solve. Make herself indispensable. Gain access to more sensitive systems." She paused, letting that sink in. "I'm ordering all refugee personnel restricted from critical system access pending a full investigation, and I'm placing Lyra Sol in protective custody until we can determine the extent of her involvement." "Protective custody," Marcus repeated flatly. "You mean detention?" "I mean," Vale said with finality, "that she's confined to quarters with armed guards while we sort this out. The safety of this station and its 3,000 inhabitants takes precedence over whatever personal arrangements you may have made." "Engineer Reed," Marcus stood motionless as the meeting dispersed around him, his mind racing through the engineering reports he'd seen, the impossible elegance of Lyra's work, the way her crystalline skin had pulsed with genuine pride when he'd praised her innovations. None of it suggested sabotage. All of it suggested a brilliant mind being scapegoated by people who couldn't understand alien technology. 2 hours later, he stood outside Lyra's quarters as 2 armed security personnel watched him with professional suspicion. Lyra sat on her narrow bunk, her bioluminescence reduced to barely visible flickers. When she saw him, the patterns flared briefly. Hope, fear, resignation all mixing in the crystalline display across her skin. "They think I'm destroying the station," she said quietly. "They think you're convenient," Marcus corrected. "What they can't understand, they fear. What they fear, they blame on the different, the foreign, the vulnerable." Lyra's patterns shifted to something he was beginning to recognize as affection, mixed with sadness. "You shouldn't have defended me. It will hurt your career." Marcus moved closer to the energy barrier separating them, close enough to see himself, reflected in the crystalline facets of her face. "Let me worry about my career. Right now I'm more concerned about proving your innocence. And if you can't," Marcus met her eyes directly, "then we'll face whatever comes next together. I meant what I said about cooking being a form of care. Well, so is standing by someone when everyone else wants them gone." For the first time in days, Lyra's skin brightened with something approaching hope. And Marcus Reed, systems engineer, a now unwitting rebel, began planning how to save the woman he was falling in love with from a station that had already condemned her. The next 48 hours tested every ethical boundary Marcus had ever considered sacred. While Lyra remained confined to quarters, he found himself living a double life, performing his duties as lead systems engineer by day while conducting his own investigation by night. The evidence was subtle but damning for those who wanted to see it that way. Lyra's modifications appeared in every sector experiencing failures, her bioresonance signatures scattered through the station's quantum matrix like fingerprints at a crime scene. But Marcus knew something the investigators didn't. He understood the actual purpose behind each change. He worked through the 3rd consecutive night in his quarters, subsisting on stimulant patches and determination as he traced every connection, every alteration, every quantum fluctuation that had occurred since Lyra had begun working maintenance. The mathematical elegance of her work became clearer with each analysis. She hadn't been sabotaging the station, she'd been saving it. "Computer," he said to his personal interface, "display overlay of system stress patterns for the past 6 months. The holographic projection filled his room with cascading data streams. Marcus had requested this same analysis weeks ago but had been too buried in routine maintenance to examine it carefully. Now, with Lyra's freedom hanging in the balance, he saw what she had seen all along. Kepler-7 was dying. The solar flares from their unstable star had been creating microfractures in the station's quantum substrate for months. Traditional human engineering could patch the symptoms, but couldn't address the underlying harmonics, degrading the entire structure. Lyra's unauthorized modifications weren't random improvements. They were strategic interventions, each one designed to redistribute stress patterns and prevent cascade failures that would have been catastrophic. "She's been playing quantum chess while the rest of us played checkers," Marcus murmured, finally understanding the full scope of what she'd accomplished. The door chime interrupted his revelation. "Enter," he called, expecting Torres with another progress report. Instead, Lyra stepped into his quarters, her crystalline patterns dim but stable. Behind her stood Dr. Patel and, surprisingly, Chief Engineer Morrison from the night shift, a grizzled veteran who'd been working space stations since before Marcus was born. "This is highly irregular," Marcus began, but Morrison raised a weathered hand. "Son, the whole situation is irregular. Doc Patel here convinced security that our prisoner needed medical evaluation. Seems she was exhibiting signs of quantum resonance, deprivation, a condition that doesn't exist in any human medical database, but makes perfect sense if you've been paying attention." Dr. Patel, a small woman with kind eyes and an iron will, moved to Marcus's workstation. "Show her," she said simply. Marcus gestured to the holographic display, watching as Lyra's patterns brightened with recognition and something like relief. "You see it," she said. It wasn't a question. "I see everything," Marcus replied. "The degradation patterns, the harmonic instabilities, the way your modifications created sympathetic resonance networks throughout the station." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "You weren't sabotaging Kepler-7. You were holding it together." Lyra moved closer to the display, her hands gesturing in graceful arcs as she manipulated the data streams. "Your people build things to resist force. We build things to flow with it." The station's quantum foundation was fighting against the star's electromagnetic patterns instead of finding harmony with them. "How long?" Morrison asked quietly. "How long before we would have noticed the problem?" Lyra's calculations appeared in the air between them, her bioluminescence interfacing directly with Marcus's computer systems in ways that should have been impossible. 3 weeks, she said finally. The cascade failure would have begun in the outer ring, spread inward through the residential sectors, then reached the reactor core. The numbers were undeniable. Without Lyra's interventions, every soul on Kepler-7 would be dead within a month. "We have to tell Vale," Marcus said. But Morrison shook his head. "Vale won't listen. She's already decided our prisoner is guilty, and admitting she was wrong means admitting that human engineering missed a station-killing problem that a refugee spotted in her spare time." He studied Lyra for a long moment. "How do we fix it? Really fix it permanently?" Lyra looked at Marcus, and he saw hope warring with fear in the patterns dancing across her features. "I would need access to the primary quantum core and—" She hesitated. "I would need a human partner. Xenthian bioresonance can sense the patterns, but human determination can force changes that my people cannot achieve alone." "You're talking about a complete reconstruction of the station's harmonic matrix," Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. "It would take days, maybe weeks of continuous work. And it would be dangerous," Lyra added. "Quantum resonance at those levels could kill a human nervous system in minutes. But with proper shielding, with someone who understands both the technical requirements and the biological realities." She left the sentence hanging, but Marcus heard what she wasn't saying. They could save the station, but only together. Only by combining human ingenuity with Xenthian intuition, determination with harmony, love with science. "Then we'd better get started," Marcus said, and saw Lyra's entire body transform into a constellation of joy and gratitude, bright enough to light the room. The plan required timing that would have made a military strategist weep with envy. They waited until the station's third shift, when skeleton crews monitored mostly automated systems and the executive staff slept in their climate-controlled quarters. Dr. Patel had sedated the guards with disguised medical patches, while Morrison had conveniently discovered maintenance issues that required shutting down surveillance in the quantum core sector. Marcus and Lyra moved through the empty corridors like ghosts, carrying equipment, disguised as routine maintenance supplies. Marcus had spent the day requisitioning harmonic resonators, quantum stabilizers, and biointerface modules through a dozen different work orders, each small enough to avoid scrutiny, but together representing 3 months of his departmental budget. The quantum core chamber stretched out before them like a cathedral dedicated to the mysteries of spacetime. Crystalline matrices hummed with barely contained energy, their surfaces reflecting and refracting the chamber's blue-white illumination into fractal patterns that could hypnotize the unwary. At the center, the primary core pulsed with a rhythm that Marcus had always assumed was regular, but now realized was subtly, dangerously off. "It's worse than I thought," Lyra said, her voice oddly harmonizing with the chamber's resonance. Her bioluminescence had activated the moment they entered, responding to quantum fields too subtle for human senses. "The dissonance is accelerating. We have maybe 6 hours before the pattern locks into irreversible decay." Marcus began unpacking their equipment, his hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the tremor of fear running through him. "Walk me through it. What exactly are we attempting?" Lyra approached the primary interface console, her crystalline fingers dancing over controls that seemed to respond to her touch with unusual sensitivity. "Imagine the station's quantum matrix as a vast musical instrument," she said, Right now, it's playing a song that sounds almost right, but becomes more discordant with each note. We need to retune every string until the entire composition harmonizes again. The comparison was oddly comforting until Marcus realized the full implications. And if we hit a wrong note? Quantum cascade failure. The station becomes a very brief, very bright star. Lyra's patterns shifted to something that might have been humor if the situation weren't so dire. Try not to let that happen. They worked in synchronization that surprised them both. Marcus would identify technical parameters, while Lyra felt the quantum responses. Their different perspectives creating solutions neither could achieve alone. Hours passed in focused intensity as they gradually coaxed the station's systems into new configurations. Harmonic stabilizer online, Marcus reported, watching displays that showed stress patterns shifting across the station's structure. Quantum. Flux is... Actually, that can't be right. We're showing efficiency improvements of 30% in the modified sectors. Your instruments are accurate, Lyra said, now interfaced directly with the primary core through bioluminescent tendrils that had emerged from her hands. Marcus tried not to think about how profoundly alien she looked in that moment, or how beautiful. The station wanted to sing in harmony all along. We're simply showing it how. The work became a meditation, a dance between human engineering precision and Zenthian quantum intuition. Marcus found himself anticipating Lyra's needs, adjusting parameters before she asked. While she guided him through harmonics his instruments could measure, but his mind couldn't truly comprehend. Then the proximity alarms began screaming. Company. Coming. Morrison's voice crackled through their concealed communicators. Vale and Brennan, full security detail. You've got maybe 3 minutes before they breach the core chamber. Marcus looked at the displays showing their progress. 60% complete, with the most delicate work still ahead. We can't stop now, he said. If we leave the matrix in this transitional state... Cascade failure in hours instead of days, Lyra finished. Her bioluminescence pulsed with determination. Then we don't stop. They heard voices in the corridor, authoritative and angry. Security codes being entered, access protocols being overridden. Marcus made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. Complete the interface, he told Lyra. I'll handle Vale. Marcus, the quantum resonance levels required could kill me, yes, but they definitely will kill everyone on this station if we don't finish. He moved to the chamber's entrance, placing himself between their work and the approaching confrontation. Trust me? Lyra's answering smile was radiant enough to power the entire station. Always. The chamber doors opened, just as every quantum matrix in the room began singing in perfect, beautiful harmony. Commander Vale stepped inside to find Marcus Reed standing guard over an alien woman whose hands had merged with their most sensitive technology, her entire body glowing like a living constellation as she rewrote the fundamental structure of their world. Stand down, Engineer Reed, Vale commanded, but her voice lacked its usual authority. She, like everyone else in the chamber, was transfixed by the impossible beauty of what Lyra was accomplishing. No, ma'am, Marcus replied calmly, not until she finishes saving all our lives. The standoff lasted exactly 37 seconds by Marcus's count, though it felt like hours, as he stood between Vale's security team and Lyra's vulnerable form. The quantum core chamber had become something beyond a mere engineering space. Lyra's bioluminescence reflecting off every crystalline surface, creating a light show that seemed to pulse with the station's own heartbeat. What you're witnessing, Dr. Patel said, stepping through the gathered security personnel with the calm authority that only medical officers could muster, is the most sophisticated quantum engineering feat ever attempted by any known species, including humans. Commander Vale's expression shifted between fury and confusion as she took in the scene, her systems engineer protecting an alien prisoner who appeared to be merging with their most critical technology. Dr. Patel, explain why you're not in your quarters as ordered. Because I took an oath to preserve life, Patel replied simply. All life. And right now every person on this station owes their continued existence to what's happening in this room. Morrison stepped forward, datapad in hand. Commander, I've been monitoring the station's harmonic resonance for the past 4 hours. Look at these readings. Vale reluctantly accepted the device, her eyes scanning the incomprehensible data streams that told the story of their salvation. These numbers, they can't be accurate. They're not just accurate, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the surreal nature of discussing engineering reports, while his heart hammered against his ribs. They're impossible by human standards. We've been living on a station that should have suffered catastrophic system failure weeks ago. Behind him, Lyra's work reached a crescendo. The quantum matrices throughout the chamber began resonating, in harmonic intervals that human ears could barely detect, but that seemed to make everyone's bones vibrate sympathetically. Her bioluminescence had intensified to the point where looking directly at her was like staring into a benevolent star. The resonance cascade that Zenthian Soul has been preventing, Morrison continued, would have killed everyone on this station within 3 weeks. What she's doing now isn't just fixing the problem, it's creating the most stable quantum foundation any human engineer has ever seen. Chief Brennan, weapon still raised but uncertainty clear in his posture, spoke for the first time. If this is true, why didn't she tell us? Why work in secret? The question hung in the air as Lyra's integration with the quantum core reached completion. Her bioluminescence gradually dimmed from stellar brightness to mere constellation levels, and she slowly withdrew her hands from the interface. When she turned to face them, her crystalline patterns showed exhaustion, accomplishment, and something that looked remarkably like hope. "Would you have believed me?" she asked quietly, her voice harmonizing strangely with the now perfect quantum resonance filling the chamber. "I am a refugee from a dead world, working maintenance jobs to survive. You see me change one coupling assembly and assume sabotage rather than expertise." Commander Vale lowered her datapad, studying Lyra with new eyes. "You could have explained. Requested proper channels." "Proper channels?" Lyra's patterns flashed with bitter amusement. "I submitted 17 formal reports detailing structural instabilities in my first month aboard this station. They were filed under alien observations and ignored. I realized that to save everyone's lives I would have to do it quietly, one system at a time." Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the security team, not as a shield, but as a bridge. "She saved us all," he said simply. "Every single person on this station owes their life to an alien woman we were ready to throw in prison for the crime of being too skilled for our narrow understanding." "The quantum matrix is stable now," Morrison added, consulting his readings. "More than stable. It's actually self-improving, adapting to stellar fluctuations and optimizing itself. I've never seen anything like it." Dr. Patel moved closer to Lyra, medical scanner in hand. "The quantum resonance integration must have been incredibly taxing. How are you feeling?" "Tired," Lyra admitted, swaying slightly before Marcus moved to support her. "But fulfilled. Your station will sing in harmony for centuries now, adapting and growing stronger with each solar storm instead of fighting against them." Commander Vale holstered her weapon, a gesture that prompted her security team to do the same. "I owe you an apology, Lyra Sol. Several apologies, in fact." She paused, clearly struggling with something. "I also owe both of you an explanation of why this situation developed as it did." "Politics," Morrison said flatly. "Same reason any competent engineer gets blamed when politicians need a scapegoat." "More complex than that," Vale replied. "Corporate oversight has been pressuring all frontier stations to reduce refugee integration programs. Too expensive, too complicated, too risky. When systems started failing, they needed proof that aliens were a liability rather than an asset. The implications hung heavy in the recycled air." Marcus felt Lyra stiffen against him, her patterns shifting to something resigned and sad. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Commander Vale's expression showed genuine regret. "Now I have to choose between saving careers and saving lives, between following orders from people who've never set foot on a frontier station and protecting the engineering genius who just prevented our extinction." As if summoned by the gravity of the moment, the chamber's communication system activated with an incoming priority message. The holographic projector flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Sector Admiral Chen from Colonial Command. "Commander Vale," The Admiral's voice cut through the quantum harmonics like a blade. "I trust you have the saboteur in custody? The board is quite interested in making an example of this situation." Marcus felt Lyra's hand find his, her crystalline, fingers intertwining with his human ones, as they faced together whatever judgment would come from the stars. Admiral Chen's holographic image dominated the quantum core chamber, his expression carved from the kind of bureaucratic stone that had crushed countless careers and dreams across the galaxy. Behind him, the sterile environment of a flagship, Command Center suggested he'd never breathed recycled air or felt the subtle vibrations that meant life support was working just this side of disaster. "Commander Vale," Chen repeated when the silence stretched too long. "Status report. I've been monitoring your communications and am concerned by the delay in processing this security matter." Vale straightened, her posture shifting into what Marcus recognized as her confrontation stance. "Admiral, the situation has evolved significantly. Our investigation has revealed that the accused party not only did not sabotage our systems, but actually prevented a catastrophic failure that would have cost every life on this station." Chen's expression didn't change, which somehow made his next words more chilling. "Commander, I hope you're not allowing personal sentiment to cloud your judgment. The refugee situation across all frontier stations requires decisive action. We cannot afford to appear weak or sympathetic to potential security threats." "With respect, sir," Dr. Patel interjected, stepping into the holographic pickup range. "There's nothing weak about recognizing expertise that saved 3,000 lives." The Admiral's eyes fixed on her with predatory focus. "And you are?" "Dr. Priya Patel, Chief Medical Officer. And I'm filing an official report stating that what I witnessed here tonight represents the most advanced engineering collaboration in recorded galactic history." Morrison stepped forward next, his grizzled face set in lines of determination. "Chief Engineer James Morrison, Night Shift. I'm seconding Dr. Patel's assessment and formally recommending that Zenthian Soul be offered a full engineering position, with appropriate security clearance." Marcus felt the moment crystallizing around them, decisions being made that would ripple across the galaxy. He squeezed Lyra's hand and stepped into the holographic field. "Marcus Reed, Lead Systems Engineer," he announced, his voice carrying 3 years of accumulated frustration, with short-sighted policies and bureaucratic blindness. "I'm officially stating that Engineer Lyra Soul's expertise exceeds that of any human engineer I've worked with, including myself. Her innovations didn't just save this station, they've created a new paradigm for quantum engineering that could revolutionize every human installation in space." Admiral Chen's face had progressed from stern to thunderous. "Engineer Reed, you're treading dangerously close to insubordination. The directive from Colonial Command is clear. Reduce refugee integration and eliminate potential security risks." Then, "Colonial Command is wrong," Marcus said with a calm that surprised him. Around the chamber he sensed rather than saw other personnel nodding in agreement. "And if following that directive means condemning the person who saved our lives, then I hereby resign my commission." The words hung in the quantum-charged air like a challenge to the universe itself. Marcus had never planned to say them, but, once spoken, they felt inevitably right. "As do I," Dr. Patel said immediately. "And I," Morrison added, with the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting decades for exactly this moment. Admiral Chen's hologram flickered, whether from technical difficulties or barely contained rage. "Commander Vale, you will arrest these individuals for mutiny and proceed with the original orders regarding the alien terrorist." "No, sir, I will not." Vale's voice carried a finality that made everyone in the chamber stand straighter. "I've reviewed the technical data, witnessed the engineering miracle, and spoken with every affected department. Lyra Soul is not a terrorist. She's quite possibly the most valuable engineer in this sector. And if you court-martial me for refusing to punish the person who saved my station, then history will remember which of us actually served the greater good." The standoff stretched across light years, Admiral Chen's fury meeting the collective defiance of an entire frontier station. Marcus found himself thinking about the choices that defined people, the moments when careers mattered less than conscience, when following orders meant abandoning humanity itself. "You're all relieved of duty pending a full investigation," Chen, finally said, his voice tight with bureaucratic rage. Transport will arrive within 72 hours to escort all parties to Colonial Command for disciplinary hearing. Admiral, Lyra spoke for the first time since the conversation began, her voice carrying harmonics that made the quantum matrices around them resonate sympathetically. Before you make final decisions, perhaps you should know that the engineering techniques I used here could be applied to any human installation. Your frontier stations could become self-improving, adaptive systems that grow stronger rather than weaker over time. Chen's expression shifted slightly, the first crack in his bureaucratic armor. Explain. Zenthian bioresonance combined with human engineering determination creates possibilities neither species can achieve alone, Lyra continued, her crystalline patterns brightening as she spoke of the science she loved. Every quantum failure becomes an opportunity for improvement. Every stellar storm makes the station more stable. The marriage of our technologies could make humanity's expansion into space not just sustainable, but exponentially more successful. Marcus watched the Admiral's face as he processed the implications, not just for this single station, but for the entire human presence in space. The promise of colonies that adapted and improved themselves, of technology that grew more sophisticated with each challenge, of partnerships that made humanity stronger than it had ever been alone. 72 hours, Chen repeated, but his tone had changed. Use them wisely. The hologram flickered out, leaving them in the gentle light of harmonized quantum matrices and the soft luminescence of Lyra's skin. For a moment, nobody spoke. Well, Morrison said finally, breaking the silence. That could have gone worse. Dr. Patel laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the resonant chamber. James, we just committed career suicide defending an alien engineer who can interface directly with quantum mechanics. I'm not sure how it could have gone worse. We could have let her die in prison while the station collapsed around us, Marcus said quietly. He turned to Lyra, seeing uncertainty warring with hope in her bioluminescent features. Question is, what do we do with these 72 hours? Lyra's patterns shifted to something that looked remarkably like determination mixed with affection. We prove that love between species isn't just possible, it's the future of galactic civilization. Commander Vale, still standing where she'd made her defiant stand against Admiral Chen, smiled for the first time since Marcus had known her. Then I suggest we get to work. If we're going to change the galaxy, we'd better have something impressive to show them when they arrive. As they filed out of the quantum core chamber, the crystalline matrices singing softly in perfect harmony behind them, Marcus realized that falling in love with Lyra Sewell had been the most important engineering decision of his life. Together they were going to build something beautiful, not just for themselves, but for every human and alien who believed that differences made people stronger, not weaker. The future they were walking toward would be written in the language of quantum mechanics and human heart, sung in harmonies that no single species could create alone. 3 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of his and Lyra's new home, watching the binary sunrise paint the sky of Harmony Prime in shades that had no names in any human language. The planet had been a failed terraforming project, until the Galactic Engineering Consortium realized that failure might be redefined with the right perspective. The atmospheric processes are responding better than projected, Lyra said, joining him at the large viewport. Her crystalline patterns glowed with contentment, reflecting the alien sunset back in fractals that made their modest dwelling feel like the inside of a kaleidoscope. The symbiotic integration between human technology and Zenthian bioharmonics is exceeding all theoretical models. Marcus wrapped his arm around her waist, marveling as always at how perfectly she fit against him, despite their very different biologies. Speaking of exceeding models, did you see Morrison's latest report? The prototype stations are showing efficiency gains of 60% over baseline human designs. And more importantly, Lyra added with a smile in her voice, zero catastrophic failures despite being deployed in the most challenging sectors of space. It turns out that when you combine human determination with alien intuition, you get infrastructure that adapts instead of just enduring. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind that neither of them could have imagined during those first nervous conversations in the Kepler-7 commissary. Admiral Chen's investigation had turned into a recruitment drive when the engineering data became undeniable. Rather than court-martial the mutineers, Colonial Command had quietly reassigned them to a classified project, developing a new generation of adaptive space installations using integrated human-alien engineering teams. The work had brought them here to Harmony Prime, where they'd been given resources and freedom to pursue innovations that would have been impossible within traditional military structures. More importantly, it had brought them together in ways that went far beyond professional collaboration. "Marcus," Lyra said, her patterns shifting to something he'd learned meant she was about to share something important. "I've been working on something in addition to the atmospheric project. Something personal." She led him from the observation deck to her private workshop, a space that had gradually become as much art installation as laboratory. Bioluminescent vines from her homeworld grew alongside Earth roses in impossible harmony, while quantum resonance chambers hummed with the sound of synchronized progress. At the center of the room stood something Marcus had never seen before, a crystalline structure about the size of a human torso, its surfaces reflecting light in patterns that seemed to pulse with life. "It's beautiful," he said, moving closer. "What is it?" "In Zenthian culture," Lyra explained, her voice carrying the reverence reserved for the most sacred traditions, when two people decide to share their lives permanently, they create a resonance crystal together. It holds the harmonic signature of their combined essence, grows stronger with their bond, and serves as a reminder that some things are more powerful than the sum of their parts. Marcus felt his breath catch as he understood what she was offering. "Lyra, are you—" "The human equivalent would be asking you to marry me," she said, her bioluminescence brightening with what he'd learned was nervous hope. "But this is more than that. It's asking you to let our lives harmonize permanently, to create something together that has never existed before." Marcus touched the crystal's surface and felt it warm under his palm, its inner light responding to his presence. "What about the biological incompatibilities? The doctors said that human and Zenthian physiology couldn't support shared offspring," Lyra finished, "but they were thinking in terms of traditional reproduction. This crystal, if we both attune to it, will grow and develop, becoming something uniquely ours, not quite human, not quite Zenthian, but carrying the best of both our essences." The implications were staggering. Not just a marriage between individuals, but a fusion of species, a living symbol of what could be accomplished when different forms of life chose cooperation over conflict. "The symbolism," Marcus said slowly. "If we do this, if we succeed, we'll be proving that human-alien partnerships can create literal new life." "More than symbolism," Lyra corrected. "Reality. The crystal will be our child in every way that matters, growing, learning, developing a unique consciousness that bridges our worlds." Marcus looked into her eyes, seeing depth that still amazed him after months of shared laughter, shared work, shared dreams of building something better than either species had imagined alone. Around them, the workshop hummed with the gentle sounds of impossible technologies working in perfect harmony. "Yes," he said simply, and placed both hands on the crystal. Lyra's hands joined his, and immediately the crystal began to pulse with combined light, the steady warmth of human emotion, mixing with the dancing patterns of Zenthian consciousness. Marcus felt the resonance not just in his hands, but throughout his entire being, as if every cell was learning a new song. As they stood together, hands joined on their crystalline creation, the workshop around them seemed to respond. Earth flowers turned toward Zenthian biolights, quantum processors harmonized with organic growth patterns, and the air itself seemed to thrum with possibilities. 6 months later, rumors would spread throughout the galaxy about the human Zenthian couple whose wedding crystal had developed into a being of pure consciousness, not physical in any conventional sense, but possessed of intelligence, curiosity, and a gift for solving problems that baffled both parent species. But on that evening, as the twin suns set over Harmony Prime and their new life began its first tentative pulse of awareness, Marcus and Lyra simply held each other and marveled at what love could accomplish when it refused to be limited by the boundaries others imposed. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species who had never learned to truly cooperate. But in a modest laboratory on a frontier world, two engineers had proven that when hearts and minds joined across the void of difference, they could create not just harmony, but entirely new forms of life. Their love story had become humanity's first step toward a future where alien meant ally, where difference meant strength, and where the most powerful force in the universe was the simple recognition that everyone, regardless of their world of origin, deserved to be seen, understood, and loved for who they truly were. As their crystal child pulsed with its first independent thought, Marcus Reed and Lyra Sull began planning their next impossible dream, a galaxy where every species might find the courage to love beyond the boundaries of their own stars.